Good morning and welcome to Centenary's Founders Day celebration. As it's noted in the program, a time when we celebrate both the past and the present, but also look to the future, the exciting times that we have ahead. I ask you to rise and join in singing lustily, as Charles Wesley said, hymn number 117, O God, our help in ages past.
You may be seated. Will you please join me in an attitude of prayer? God of our ancestors and all the generations that came before us, we invoke your blessing on this gathering of students, faculty, staff, trustees, and guests. With grateful hearts, we honor and celebrate those whose passion, foresight, and dedication gave us this hallowed institution that we enjoy today. Grant wisdom and knowledge to all who traverse these halls of Centenary College, that they may be faithful stewards and community leaders for future generations to come. For this we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Good morning. Welcome to the Founders Day Convocation at Centenary College of Louisiana. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our guests, to our Board of Trustees, and to President Emeritus Don Webb. Founders Day reminds us to consider those individuals almost 2 centuries ago who thought to found this college. And on this day 100 years ago, February 22nd, 1918, Centenary was also thinking about the founder of our country. Our archivist, Chris Brown, shares that the faculty meeting minutes of February 18th noted a vote to celebrate the birthday of President George Washington by closing school at 12:30 on the 22nd. The attendance for this faculty meeting consisted of 4 professors, and the president of the college, who also taught classes. And in case you're wondering, we are not closing school today at 12:30. Honoring the past doesn't always mean repeating it. Earlier this morning, we honored a number of Centenary colleagues for their years of service and for their commitment to teaching and scholarship. In particular, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Sam Shepard, the recipient of the Charlton Lyons Summer Research Award, Professor Jessica Hawkins, this year's Outstanding Teacher Award recipient, and Ms. Lynette Viskoski, the recipient of the President's Excellence Award for Staff. I would like to ask them, as well as all of the recipients of service pins, to stand to be recognized again. And now please help me welcome the 31st president of Centenary College of Louisiana, Christopher L. Holloman.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to note that this is the first time in almost 70 years that we've had a college procession without Dr. Betty Spears, who passed away, and we celebrated her life last Friday, and she is missed. Thanks to the choir, that was a great anthem, wonderful lyrics. If you weren't paying attention, get one of your friends to recite to you the lyrics, really meaningful and appropriate. If I remember correctly, something on the order of every hand must find a place to work, a great message. It's my honor to introduce Mr. John Atkins to bring our Founders Day address. I was in Washington recently, first of the month, and I was meeting with Senator Cassidy. And I won't embarrass John by repeating all the nice things that Senator Cassidy said about him. His name came up in a different context. But the gist of it was that, and you can read John's biography in your program, the gist of it was that here's a man who has a lot going on in his life. He's got important business interests, he's got a rich personal life, and yet he stepped up and took on a role in public service because it was what the community needed. And I think that says worlds about him. You know, it's possible to think of great colleges and universities that exist outside of great cities. But it's very difficult, not impossible, but difficult to think of the reverse, a great city without a great college. 110 years ago, the city fathers of Shreveport recognized that. And to make a city great, Shreveport needed a great college. I'm not sure Centenary was great at that moment in its history, but it is great today and will be greater tomorrow. I honor the vision of the people that made the move from Jackson, Louisiana to Shreveport possible, and I'm honored that one of those descendants, actually two, but today John Atkins, I'm honored that they serve on our board. I'm honored that John takes the time out and supports this college so faithfully. I am proud to introduce him as our Founders Day speaker.
Well, thank you for those kind words, President Holloman. I appreciate it very much. It's very kind of you, and it sure is a pleasure to be speaking to you all here on Founders Day at Centenary College of Louisiana. But one of the problems with speaking at Founders Day of Centenary College is choosing which founding date to discuss. Do we discuss the 1825 date, where the College of Louisiana was originally formed and our predecessor was formed? I think it's appropriate that our charter goes back to 1825. But then there's also the 1845 date, where Centenary College of Louisiana, struggling at the time, merged with another struggling Methodist-based college out of Mississippi called Centenary College. The two colleges merged to form Centenary College of Louisiana. Of course, that's a name that we know and love today, but they were still located in Jackson, Louisiana. Or thirdly, do we recognize that third date of 1908 as the founding date, the date that Centenary College of Louisiana moved from Jackson, Louisiana to Shreveport, Louisiana? So it's hard to choose which date to speak to. So I've chosen to speak to the interim period, the period between 1845 and 1908. That was a period, as you all may have noted from the program, that was filled with turmoil and change. So I thought we would appropriately name this little talk how war, pestilence, and plate tectonics led to the relocation of Centenary to Shreveport. So I'm sure y'all are wondering, how is John going to tie these three random subjects together? So bear with me. We have a logical storyline. And I'd like to begin that storyline in 1845, an appropriate date, the merger of Centenary College of Louisiana with Centenary College out of what was then Brandon Springs, Mississippi. Both colleges were struggling. Centenary was, the College of Louisiana was really having a tough time with its attendance and its funding. Centenary College in Brandon Springs had chosen a beautiful place for their college, but the place was so beautiful and remote that they couldn't get any students to attend, to access that remote location. So the colleges came together and merged in Jackson, Louisiana in 1845. And in the late 1840s and 1850s, things were starting to get a little traction. Things were improving. King was cotton in Louisiana in the 1850s. There was money to spend on education. People were thinking about the future of their children. The average attendance at Centenary College during those days was over 200 students per year, which was a good solid number in the 1850s. In the mid-1850s, there was a building campaign that was initiated and supported by the Methodist Church that led to the construction of a beautiful academic building in the center of the Jackson campus. It was a 3-story fortress-like structure with Gothic overtones, and then there was an east wing and a west wing that complemented it nicely. And so in the late 1850s, we had a beautiful new academic structure. We had good, solid leadership. We had steady attendance, plenty of money. Things were going well. Centenary was looking up. But then in April of 1861, a Louisiana general by the name of P.G.T. Beauregard fired on Fort Sumter, beginning the Civil War, and that caused great change for Centenary College. Initially, the trustees of Centenary felt that they could weather the storm of the war and continue to operate through this turmoil, but late in 1861, it became apparent that that was not going to be the case. The students had already departed for war, and the last trustee minutes from 1861 read something to the effect of, "School suspended, students all gone to war, may God be with the right." So obviously it's tough to have a college with no students, so the college went into suspension during the war. All of South Louisiana fell to the Federalist troops by 1862, and Centenary became occupied by a federal army. These, of course, were probably young soldiers. They were barracked in the center academic building of Centenary College, and they did not treat the building kindly. They did not treat any of the campus kindly, and by the close of the war, the physical facilities of the Centenary College were greatly reduced. They'd only been built a few short years previously, but they had been weathered and aged beyond their time. So the war is over. Centenary College of Louisiana tries to get back on its feet. These are challenging times. They have no students, no money, deteriorated buildings, and they're located in the center of a region that's going through an economic crisis. Fortunately, there was a Methodist bishop named John Keener, Bishop John Keener. Interestingly, he had served as the superintendent for Confederate chaplains west of the Mississippi during the Civil War. But he was living in New Orleans in the years following the war, and he engaged on Centenary College and applied all of his efforts I shouldn't say all, he applied his efforts in many areas, but he applied a great deal of effort to preserving Centenary College, not only preserving the college, but preserving it in its location there in the Florida parishes where Jackson, Louisiana is located. So Bishop Keener worked hard to keep the college in good standings with the Methodists, and he also went door to door raising money for the college. But by the turn of the century, by 1900, Bishop Keener was considerably advanced in age. He was running out of steam and energy, and the future of Centenary College in Jackson, Louisiana was in question. And the trustees were basically at wit's end around 1900, 1903. Well, bear with me as we transition to Lake Inn, Louisiana, about 150 miles to the north and west of Jackson, Louisiana, about 50 miles south of Shreveport, where there's another guy who's at wit's ends. And this gentleman is a farmer and merchant named John Baxter Atkins. Obviously, there's a similar name to the one I'm blessed to have, but he was my great-grandfather. And John Baxter Atkins was a very interesting fellow. From what I have learned from family lore and his obituary, he was born in 1864 in Canton, Mississippi, and by 1886, at age 22, he and his brother moved to Lake Inn, Louisiana to start their fortune, or start their business career. And John Baxter and his brother bought a small mercantile store that was 32 feet by 32 feet and located on the Texas Pacific Railroad. They set themselves into commerce, began trading, buying and selling, and trying to squeeze out a profit. Well, they must have been pretty good at what they did, because by the turn of the century, 14 years later in 1900, they had grown their one 32-foot by 32-foot store into a chain of 10 mercantile stores strung up and down the Red River, all connected by telegraph and telephone lines. They had accumulated 30,000 acres of cotton land. They had 3,500 head of mule and associated equipment that they used for farming. And they had 13 cotton mills and one seed mill. And by 1903, they had an annual revenue of about $1 million in 1903 dollars, which was quite an operation in 1903. But there were storm clouds on the horizon, and John Baxter Atkins knew that. Two big things that gave him concern was, one, the debt that he had used to build their company, and two, was an invading army from the southwest. We'll come back to the debt in a moment, but let's talk about the invading army from the southwest. I know you all are thinking, is this Pancho Villa? Is it Santa Anna who came back for a final campaign? Well, this army that I'm referring to is a six-legged. Each soldier is six-legged, and it was the boll weevil. And the boll weevil crossed the Rio Grande from Mexico into Brownsville, Texas in 1892. And it began breeding and consuming at a voracious pace. And a single boll weevil couple lays 300 to 700 eggs at a time per cycle, per breeding cycle, and they have 8 breeding cycles per year. So if you do the math, those math professors can tell us that a single pair of boll weevil can generate 2 million offspring in 1 year. So when you have that kind of population explosion, you're constantly looking for new places to eat. So if you look back at the agricultural maps from the late 1890s, through the early 1900s, it looks like a topographic map where they're tracking the boll weevil as it advances from Brownsville, Texas, up to the northeast towards the traditional cotton belt. And by 1900, the boll weevil are at the Sabine River knocking on the door, and John Baxter Atkins knows they're there. And remember, he's built a business based largely around the cotton trade. I forgot to mention they also had, John Baxter Atkins and his brother had 2 paddle wheelers that would move cotton down the Red River to the Mississippi River to New Orleans, then exchange that for dry goods, bring those goods back up and sell them in the 10 mercantile stores. So they had like an integrated operation. And this integrated operation was vulnerable to that invading army of boll weevils that are now knocking at the door, and to that debt that they've used to build up their company. So we've talked about war, we've talked about pestilence. So you're asking, all right, well, where does plate tectonics come in? Well, now we're at the plate tectonics chapter. The geologists in the room will remember that the crust of the earth is made up of various plates. The mantle is made up of various plates that are constantly moving at very slow rates, but oftentimes bumping into each other, causing things like volcanoes, earthquakes, and mountain ranges. Well, one of those intersections of plates occurs where the Pacific plate butts up against the North American plate right at San Francisco Bay. And that Pacific plate is wanting to move up to the north, and there's a north-south trending strike-slip fault that exists there that goes right through the middle of San Francisco Harbor. And in 1906, the pressure had gradually built up on this strike-slip fault, and it gave way, and we had 28 feet of thrust along that strike-slip fault, causing a huge earthquake in San Francisco that registered 7.8 on the Richter scale. So this huge earthquake destroyed many of the buildings in San Francisco, but in disrupting San Francisco, it also broke the natural gas lines that laid underneath San Francisco that was used to light and heat many of the homes and buildings in San Francisco. And when these gas lines were ruptured, many of them caught fire, and so not only do you have the huge damage of the earthquake, but you've got this fire in association with it that leads to additional damage. And by the end of the catastrophe, San Francisco had lost 3,000 people, and 80% of their buildings had been destroyed. So what does San Francisco do? Of course, the first step is to collect your insurance policies and begin to rebuild, borrow money to rebuild. So when the insurance claims all came in, it drew heavily on the financial resources, the money reserves of the big East Coast money center banks. And all of a sudden, these East Coast money center banks are seeing their money go out the window to go to the West Coast to help rebuild San Francisco and to pay off these insurance policies. So it led to a general banking constriction, a general constriction of credit that rippled all through the U.S. in 1906. And so if I'm a banker and I've got loans to this merchant farmer guy in Lake End, Louisiana, who's about to see the boll weevil come into his place and damage his operation, I'm seeing that as a bad credit risk. So the banker started pulling John Baxter Atkins loans. Well, fortunately, when he knew he was vulnerable, so prior to all this, he had put an exit plan in place. And sometime around, it must have been around 1903, he and his brother had acquired 260 acres to the north of their farming operation in Shreveport, just south of what was then the center of Shreveport. But this 260 acres was just their bailout plan, just their plan B. But all of a sudden, the banks started calling their loans, and he had to implement his plan B earlier than he initially had thought. So he starts selling off property, selling off equipment, paying off the bank loans, while simultaneously looking for a way to enhance the value of this 260 acres that he has south of Shreveport. Now, there wasn't anything special about the land at the time. It was nice property, but there wasn't anything special about it. There were two problems with it. One, there wasn't anything to draw people there, to make people want to live there and develop it. And two, it was difficult to get to because it was south of town, and we didn't have cars then, so people would have to ride their horses down there, their buggies down there, and it was so, in 1906 days, it was a long way from home, or a long way from downtown. So the first thing he did was laid a plan to lay a trolley car line from downtown Shreveport all the way down into what was then called what he envisioned to be the Gladstone neighborhood. So that was his plan for getting people down there, but he still needed a way to make people want to go down there and want to develop that area. And these days you would build a golf course, perhaps. Those days, maybe you'd have a high school, but a college might be even better. But fortunately, John Baxter Atkins, in his widely spread business dealings, he knew people from around the state. He knew people in the Methodist conference who had expressed their desire to see Centenary find a new home. And he knew people in Shreveport with the Progressive League who wanted to see a college in Shreveport. The Progressive League wanted to see a college so badly in Shreveport that they had passed recently, in the 1906 era, had passed a millage that would generate $40,000 a year, more or less, that could be provided for operating capital for 10 years. The millage had a 10-year term on it. So you've got a college that needs a new home, you've got a community that wants a college and has put up a mill to provide working capital to that college, but it still needs a home. So that's where John Baxter Atkins came in. He and his partner, Mr. Rutherford, had put together a plan to donate 40 acres to Centenary College and provides, I think it was $7,500 in cash to get them started and allow them to then get their foothold in Shreveport and use the millage to help pay their operating costs for the first 10 years. So it was a real godsend to Centenary to have this opportunity arise. It was a real godsend to my grandfather to have an opportunity to help Centenary find a new home and then use that as the center point, the center place for the Gladstone development, which he then was able to develop and get back on his feet and reestablish his business career. And it was a godsend to Shreveport to have the opportunity to have Centenary College here in our community. So that's how war, pestilence, and plate tectonics led to Centenary College coming to Shreveport. I think the key lesson here is that the world is a complex place. It's hard to predict every twist and every turn that may occur in one's life. So one needs to be able to, like John Baxter Atkins, one needs to be able to think about see the big picture, think critically, and communicate clearly. And these are just the types of skills that Centenary College provides to the people in our community and beyond. So I think that you all, the students in the chapel today, I think you all made a very wise decision in choosing a liberal arts college like Centenary College, because it will allow you to see the big picture, think critically, and communicate clearly. So I hope you all have enjoyed this little story. Thank you for indulging me, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I did mean to note that you do win the prize for best talk title so far in my tenure here. Good job there. And I was really struck. I mean, was that a liberal arts talk or what, right? I mean, we got math, we got geography, we got history, we got geology, we got a little agricultural science thrown in there. This is, as he summed it up so well, things are so interconnected, being able to draw on those various fields, put that knowledge together in important ways. That's what we do. That was a great lesson. At this point, I'd ask you to rise and join me in singing our alma mater, followed by the academic procession.
Would you please bow your heads for the benediction? Brothers and sisters, go forth into the world, strengthened by the foundation of those who came before you. Celebrate the life within you and let it overflow to all of those around you. Live boldly, knowing that God goes before you, and may the peace of God embrace you today and in the days to come. Amen.